I think the lesson there might be not to follow Mr. Kane. Thank you, Tom. So the Order of the Most Holy Trinity and of the Captives was approved by Pope Innocent III on December 17, 1198. That's 824 years ago tomorrow. This was the culmination of 5 years of introspection, prayer, and work by Father John de Matha, who had a vision during his first Mass in 1193 of Jesus between two slaves, a European and a Moor, holding each by the hand, and with one of them holding a staff with a red and blue cross. But that vision at that Mass was also years in the making. Father John de Matha was originally Monsieur John de Matha, teacher of philosophy and theology. And his appointment as a professor was years in the making, since before that he was the student, John from Matha. One thing we learned from this backward reckoning is that you need to prepare for the big moments in your life by the way you approach all the little moments in your life. In fact, you will only have those big moments in your life, college acceptance or graduate school acceptance, graduations, wedding, passing the bar exam or your medical boards, writing a novel or a song, getting your CPA, the job that you want, playing a sport or music in college or professionally, if you take care of all the little moments. I love the gospel that we read each feast day of St. John de Matha, and here's another way of telling it. St. Simon de Rojas began a soup kitchen to feed people that is now, 400 years later, the longest consecutive running service of its kind. Feed the hungry, nourish the thirsty. By the year 1206, 8 years after the order was approved, they had opened and were running hospitals. By 1213, when the order was 15 years old, at least 4 Trinitarian hospitals were in existence to explicitly serve the poor. A famous Trinitarian hospital was one in Quetta, North Africa. It was run by Father Roque. He took over the hospital in 1579 after he had been on 2 ransoming expeditions where he personally freed more than 530 captives. Father Roque realized that merely freeing people did not necessarily restore a former captive's health or wholeness, and so he established the hospital. And then he founded a college to train doctors and workers for the hospital. Welcome the stranger, take care of the ill. In 1643, Father Lucian, Brother Boniface, went to Algeria to ransom 48 captives, only to be told once they arrived that the agreed upon price had changed. So Brother Boniface freely chose to become a slave to ransom additional people. He would be confined to and minister in a prison cell for 2 years until Father Lucian could return for him. Visit those in prison, and there are many kinds of prisons. In 1939, the Italian bishop, Joseph Dodona, gave up his living quarters to create a residence for seminarians. He established an orphanage, and during the terrible food rationing of World War II, he begged food for the poor. In a famous story, a poor woman came one winter evening to his house. He opened the door himself. He did not keep servants, and she begged for clothes for her newborn baby. With no extra clothes, he took her to the chapel, said a prayer, stripped the altar of its coverings, and gave them to the woman to wrap the child. The next day, the nuns arriving for Mass told him that someone had broken in and stolen the altar linens. Bishop Joseph smiled and explained what he had done and said, "Those linens are now warming the baby Jesus. Clothe the naked." Clearly, my de Matha brothers, that is the ability to see Jesus in others. This particular teaching of Jesus, the parable of separating the goats and the sheep, is not given in response to a question from his followers or his enemies, as many of the other parables are. And you will notice that Jesus does not say, teach the uneducated, or instruct the ignorant. But the Trinitarians recognized that this gospel implies that someone must be teaching and someone must be taught. There are 3 of these teaching stories in a row. The first is a parable in which those who do not plan for the future are contrasted with those who do. The second is the parable of the master who gives bags of gold to 3 servants to hold. 2 of them invest the gold and reap benefits. The third hides the gold and gets nothing. You must invest in the abilities and gifts you have been given. And then this one of the sheep and the goats. What is education if not a plan for the future? And it requires an investment of your abilities and gifts. You know, this year we adopted the theme of hospitality, or sacred hospitality. The hospitality industry serves our wants. Sacred hospitality serves our needs. When we did this, our natural focus was to think about the ways that we are hosts. But hospitality is always reciprocal. There are no hosts if there are no guests, just as there are no teachers if there are no students, and just as there are no leaders if there are no followers. And each role has substantial obligations. So there's a deeper meaning here. No one plays one role all the time. You are not always the host, the teacher, or the leader, any more than you are always the guest, the student, or the follower. In a life well lived in accordance with a Trinitarian mission, you will play reciprocal roles multiple times, even in a given day. You will host a stag for a day, and then be a guest in the world of English 9, and then a teacher when you explain something to a friend, or to your instructor, or recap the day to your parents. You will follow when you're being directed, and then you will lead when you encourage a peer to make a good decision. You should be a gracious guest in the world that Mary Shelley or Ralph Ellison creates, or in the world of Algebra 1 or biology, or in the world of U.S. government or Christian life. To be a gracious guest means to respect the environment or ecosystem of knowledge, to ask questions carefully, to understand the world to which you are being introduced. You should welcome others as you give the younger students advice about classes or sports. And when you explain to a teacher about a song you love or a sport you play, when you share with a table mate a holiday tradition or favorite team, you are the host welcoming that person into a part of your world that you hope they will treat with respect. If you commit to seeing Jesus in the least of your brothers and sisters, you will be opening yourself so that others can see Jesus in you. There are 62,000 words in the 4 Gospels. The ones we read today are the only ones that specifically explain how you should prepare for the Last Judgment. In the Epistle of James, which many argue is written by someone familiar with Matthew's Gospel, the following assertion gets made. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, "Oh, go in peace, keep warm, well fed," but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, "Well, you have faith, I have deeds. So show me your faith without deeds. I will show you my faith by my deeds." This is the Trinitarian calling, and so it is our calling. In the 1930s, a Spanish Trinitarian, Father Placido, is a brilliant scholar, was appointed the head of a Trinitarian school in Alcazar. He was famous for a saying that we might all embrace. Do good and don't look to whom. Again, do good, don't look to whom. Not up to us to decide whether a person is worthy of our help. The question is, do they need our help? In the same way, sacred or genuine hospitality does not give people what they want, it gives people what they need. When, as a community, we hold a coat drive, we clothe people. When we hold the food drive, we feed people. When we go on service trips, we welcome the stranger. When we teach each other, we visit the prisoner. When we do these things, we render incarnate the Trinitarian mission. And these acts of charity are one way we show our faith by our deeds. But in addition to charity, the Trinitarians demand out of us justice. And this is an academic commitment. We take our Trinitarian learning into the world to make the world more just. We apply our knowledge in sciences and math, in business and engineering, in computers, in the arts and the humanities, to systems that cry out for justice. The Trinitarians, represented today by Father James, Father Damien, Father Josh, Father Albert, Father Benoge, Brother Kim, Brother Marvin, are gracious guests. They are anxious to learn from us. They delight in our accomplishments. They are desirous of seeing us in our worlds. And the Trinitarians are exceptionally generous hosts. They welcome us into their charism. They show us the things we should value. They offer us what we need. And like great hosts everywhere, they make sure we will not leave empty-handed. We take with us the incomparable gifts of relationships, of freedom and responsibility, of charity and justice, and of humility. I ask you to please rise and join me in thanking the Trinitarians for their sacred hospitality.